Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. You know what else happened? South Carolina found a new head football coach. They went ahead and hired Oklahoma tight ends coach Shane Beamer. Let me just say that I'm a little bit underwhelmed. So let's talk about it. Let's get into it. And let's do a little bit of background. Obviously, look, we all remember what happened at South Carolina a few weeks ago. Will Muschamp is fired. Actually, right after I recorded that Sunday podcast, Will Muschamp is fired. He is let go. And the search begins. And the AD, Ray Tanner, basically said very simply this. The days of playing games that are 17-7 are over. Like, we're going for an offensive guy, a creative guy, an interesting guy. And I will say, for South Carolina, this was actually kind of a good year to have a job opening because on the one hand, first of all, there just aren't going to be as many jobs that open up, and we all know why. It's the pandemic, it's money, it's this, it's that. And there's also, like, weirdly, a lot of really good candidates right in your area, right? Like, Luke Fickell's not really a possibility at South Carolina. Matt Campbell from Iowa State's not really a possibility. But you got Hugh Freeze right down the road at Liberty, who has had success in the SEC. You have Billy Napier, who is the head coach at Louisiana, who, for people who do not know, is from Tennessee but worked at both Clemson and South Carolina State. He never worked at the University of South Carolina. But he worked within the state, knows the state well, recruited the state. So you have that guy. And then, as I just said a minute ago, you have a guy named Jamie Chadwell, who is the head coach at Coastal Carolina that has built this program out of nothing, has put his stamp on it. The players and fans and everybody involved clearly have fun. They got all the mullets. They do these crazy post-game celebrations. So you have a lot of really good candidates right there. And so forgive me if I can't get excited about the fact that you just hired Oklahoma's tight ends coach, Shane Beamer, okay? And so before we get into why I hate the hire, let's get into why the hire does make sense. So the reasons, if you do enough research, you do enough homework, you just read articles, I'm not claiming that I have, like, expert insight, but if you do your homework, there are logical reasons why this happened. First of all, Shane Beamer was the recruiting coordinator, special teams coordinator during basically the heyday of South Carolina football when Steve Spurrier really had it rolling, right? He was the guy that built the ground level relationships with a lot of the best players that were part of the greatest run in program history. And I will say, in Shane Beamer's defense, a lot of those best players came to bat for him. Melvin Ingram, star defensive lineman on the LA Chargers, came out and said, this should be the guy that we hire. DJ Swearinger, big, strong, athletic safety who now plays for the New Orleans Saints, said this should be the guy that we hire. So he has ties to the program. He had the support of the most prominent alums. He obviously has Beamer as the last name. For people who don't know, his father is the Hall of Famer Frank Beamer, who, by the way, was on this podcast. Hate to brag, but his dad's a friend of the show. And then finally, I will also say in South Carolina's defense, there is just also the possibility that, like, maybe people just didn't want it. Now, I don't think that happened, and I'll get into why in a second. But what I will say about South Carolina is that it is not an easy job. Now, it's not a bad job. It's actually a really good job. But again, context always matters, and here's the context. Not only is Florida and Georgia playing at a really high level, and look, I know I'm critical of Kirby Smart, but the guy wins 10 games every year under normal circumstances. Can't beat Bama, can't get to the top of the sport, but he has Georgia in a really good place. Dan Mullen clearly has Florida in a really good place. And the thing that nobody talks about, it's not only those two teams in your division, it's the fact that Dabo Swinney has things freaking rolling in the state. And I think that did make this job a little harder to fill from the perspective of, I think a lot of these young, dynamic coaches are sitting there saying, dude, this is my shot. I'm making decent money at wherever. And I'm doing well. I'm having success. Do I really want to take my one shot. Because once you get fired from a Power 5, it's really hard to get a second job if you just suck, right? If you have, NCAA problems, whatever, it's different. But if you just suck at your job, it's really hard to get a second opportunity. And so I think a lot of these young guys are like, dude, do I really want to go to a place where I am way behind the top 2 teams in my division? And oh, by the way, I'm also have a juggernaut in my own state in Clemson. So I think that's fair to say. I think it's fair to wonder. I think it's fair to ask if that's really what a lot of college coaching candidates would want. That is why I will defend South Carolina, because I do wonder how much interest there was in the job. But what I will also say is this. If Shane Beamer really is your guy, you really want the tight ends coach at Oklahoma, isn't he going to be available like in a week from now or 2? Like why did you have to make this hire now? Like, why did you have to make the hire the second your season ended? By the way, the news came out in the middle of Oklahoma's game against Baylor on Saturday night. Did you really have to make the hire now? Now, I will say, I do wonder if a few things happened. First of all, I do wonder if this was a hire that the AD really made or a hire that potentially the boosters made. Because the rumor out of South Carolina, and it's just a rumor, I'm not reporting it as fact, I'm not saying it as fact, but the rumor out of South Carolina that I've heard from more than one person is that there was one booster who paid Will Muschamp's entire buyout of $13 million. Now, it's spread over multiple years. It's not a lump sum. But when you pay a $13 million buyout, you have say in the hire, and I do wonder if maybe this guy or girl did have a lot of pull in the decision that was being made with Shane Beamer. And there's also a possibility that some of the candidates did interview and just weren't interested. Scott Satterfield, by the way, rode in on his white horse to Louisville on Saturday, saying, "Oh, I'm not interested in the job." Yeah, but you interviewed, so like you can't pull the "I'm not interested." You interviewed. There was also a report that Billy Napier from Louisiana interviewed, and I would assume that happened on Saturday because he announced on Saturday night that he was coming back to Louisiana. He played on Friday night at Louisiana. And so I do wonder if maybe those guys interviewed and maybe either they weren't interested or more specifically the school wasn't interested. It could also be that the school already had its mind made up that Shane Beamer was the guy. But to me, again, it goes back down to what I just said. If Shane Beamer really is the guy, did you have to make this decision now? Like if this is the guy, did you really have to decide on December 5th with 2 weeks left in the season when all the best coaches are still coaching? Did you really have to jump in and say, this is my guy, I got to get him right now? First of all, there's no other jobs that are even open. Forget there being no other jobs that are even open. Even if there are, nobody would have gone and hired Shane Beamer as their head coach. He wasn't on anybody else's list. Nobody else wanted him. If he was available now, he would have been available in 2 weeks. And to me, that's my problem with this whole circumstance, is regardless of whether he's your guy or not, even if he's not, it's your job to go get the best coach available. And so don't you have to do your fans, alums, boosters the civic duty of waiting to see if you can interview Jamie Chadwell from Coastal Carolina? And maybe it'll take until after his regular season is done, but don't you have to do that? He's right in your state. He's dominating. He barely even have to move. I don't know how far South Carolina or Myrtle Beach is from Columbia. Well, guy wouldn't even have to move. Don't you have to do your due diligence on him? Don't you have to do your due diligence on Hugh Freeze? If you did interview Billy Napier on Saturday, maybe you want to stay for a second or third interview. If he came for the first interview, he's at least interested. So don't tell me you can't get him because he's at least interested. And you went with Shane Beamer, who would have been available in 2 weeks. And so to me, that's my only issue. Maybe Shane Beamer would be great. Now, I find it hard to believe a first-time head coach is going to come into the SEC East at the third best job and have a ton of success, maybe the fourth best job. Kirby Smart did, but Mark Richt left a lot more than Will Muschamp did. But did you really have to do it right now? Like really, you had to do it right now. That's my big thing. And I'll finally say on the South Carolina thing, this is another thing that I find interesting that nobody talks about. South Carolina let go of Will Muschamp 2 weeks ago. And I'm not criticizing him for doing it. It had run its course. He wasn't the guy. He had one good season. He wasn't the answer. They probably should have never hired him in the first place if we're being perfectly honest. But I bring that up to say I do find this interesting, is that the reason that South Carolina made the move when they did is because they wanted to pull the old, well, we want to get a head start on the coaching search. And I find it funny because I hear people say that all the time. But does the team that ever gets the head start on the coaching search ever actually get the best candidate, ever actually get the best guy? Is it ever actually really an advantage to get an actual head start on the coaching search? Because when I think about it, a few things. First of all, when you're hiring in an SEC or a Big 12 or a Big 10 school, good jobs, the best coaches that you want are currently coaching. And they're probably not going to speak to you during their season, so you got to wait till after the season anyway. So getting a head start has no advantage because you can't talk to the guys you want to talk to. But then at the end of the day, the best jobs are the best jobs. Whether you're talking to somebody in November, whether you're talking to them in January, whatever, the best jobs are the best jobs. And so, if Texas opens up, or Alabama opens up, or Ohio State opens up, those jobs are going to get the best candidates because they're a better job than South Carolina. Just like, by the way, South Carolina is a better job than Vandy. If Vandy had opened before South Carolina did, there isn't a single coach that thinks he can get the South Carolina job that's going to get the Vandy job because, well, they got to the market first. And I see this all the time, and it cracks me up. Even at the NFL level, like I saw the Detroit Lions. Oh, we gotta fire Matt Patricia to get a jump on the coaching search. Well, crap, man. You're still the Detroit Lions. You still stink. I think they beat the Bears today, by the way. I'm recording right after these NFL games. But you're still Lions, and the best job available is the Houston Texans because they got Deshaun Watson. And the best job after that is probably going to be the L.A. Chargers because they got Justin Herbert and Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram and Derwin James. And so it just cracks me up that we do this thing. I got to get a jump start on the coaching search. Really? To get that guy? And then if you are, don't you have a due diligence to wait until after the season, talk to everybody that you could possibly talk to see if they're the right fit or not? I'm guessing if you wanted to talk to Steve Sarkisian, he's probably not going to do it the week of the LSU game. If you want to talk to Jamie Chadwell, probably not going to do it the week of the BYU game. So it's weird to me. It's fine, whatever. But I'll just say this. I know enough South Carolina fans to know I get the obvious ties. I don't think anybody's